Greetings and salutations. Today we'll be covering the Springfield Three and their perplexing vanishing act. On the fateful day of June 7th, 1992, in Springfield, Missouri, a baffling puzzle would begin to unfold. This was the mysterious disappearance of three women, which left an eerie void in the hearts of their loved ones. The three who had gone missing were Suzie Streeter, her friend Stacy McCall, along with Susan's mother, Sherrill Levitt. All three of them would vanish without a trace from Levitt's home. What made this puzzling case even more enigmatic was the lack of any obvious signs of foul play. Their personal belongings, cars, even their purses were all left untouched. It appeared as if they had just evaporated into thin air. The only particularity that was seen as a potential clue was a shattered porch light globe, suggesting there might have been some amount of struggle. However, its meaning and the cause for the shattering remained elusive. To add to the intrigue was an answering machine which seemed to hold a crucial message, one which could have provided insight into the mysterious vanishing. However, fate seemed to have played a cruel hand, as the message was inadvertently erased after having been found, leaving investigators grasping for any leads. In 1997, Robert Craig Cox, a convicted kidnapper and robber, would claim to possess knowledge on the three women's fates, asserting that their bodies would never be found. Yet, upon analysis of his statements, seasoned investigators remain skeptical, casting doubt on the credibility of Cox's claims. Decades have passed since the haunting day of their disappearance, yet the whereabouts of the three, as well as any trace of their existence, remains shrouded in shadows. The case of the Springfield Three continues to confound even the most seasoned of minds in the realm of unsolved mysteries. The question remains, will the truth ever be unveiled? Only time holds the key to understanding this enigmatic vanishing act, which has captured the minds of many investigator and internet sleuth alike. The vanishing act of the Springfield Three involved three individual women, each one with their own unique traits. However, they did share a series of similarities. Sherrill Elizabeth Levitt was a 47-year-old cosmetologist who stood at a petite 5 feet tall, weighing in at 110 pounds. Her short, light blonde hair framed her face, and she was said to have piercing brown eyes. Her ears were adorned with piercings. As a single mother, she shared an exceptionally close bond with her daughter, Suzie Elizabeth Streeter, who was merely 19 years old upon her vanishing. Suzie herself stood at 5 foot 2 inches, weighing in at 102 pounds, with her shoulder-length blonde hair sharing the same eyes as her mother. However, she had a distinguishing scar on her upper right forearm, along with a small mole on the left corner of her mouth. She, much like her mother, had her ears pierced. Finishing up this enigmatic trio was Stacy Kathleen McCall, an 18-year-old woman who stood at 5 foot 3 inches and weighed approximately 120 pounds. She had long, dark blonde hair which cascaded down her sides, and she also was noted to have light-colored eyes. The profile of these women seemed to be similar enough to point towards a potential preference if there was a criminal act inflicted onto them. Now that the victims' profiles have been covered, we can focus in on the perplexing vanishing act itself. Suzie Streeter, Stacy McCall, and Sherrill Levitt were out on a night marked by celebration and camaraderie. The two teens were fresh graduates from Kickapoo High School. Streeter and McCall would be last spotted around 2 a.m. on June 7th, 1992, as they bid farewell to the guests of the graduation parties they had attended. Witnesses report a sighting of the duo in Battlefield earlier that night, which would add on to the questions surrounding their final movements. The graduating teens intended to spend the night at their friend's house. Their friend, Janelle Kirby's abode seemed to have been too crowded that night for them to stay, leading their plans for the night to veer off course. Instead, they would set out for Streeter's home at 1717 East Delmar Street. They intended to retire for the night under the familiar roof. It appears they had arrived without any trouble. This is due to their belongings, including clothing, jewelry, and purses, along with their vehicle, remaining untouched at the house. As the morning sun cast its glow, the disquieting truth was unveiled when Kirby and her boyfriend arrive at the Streeter's house around 9 a.m., expecting their friends to join them for a day at the water park. An eerie silence would envelop the scene. The front door was noted to be strangely unlocked and open into an empty dwelling, devoid of any trace of Streeter, McCall, or Levitt. Further still, an ominous discovery awaited them. The porch light's glass had been shattered, hinting at the fact that there could have been some form of disturbance. Inside, the mystery only deepened. Streeter and Levitt's beloved Yorkshire Terrier, Cinnamon, was noted to exhibit signs of severe agitation. There was also a series of unnerving phone calls that added to the chilling ambiance. Calls that would later be deemed potential clues, but said calls would be inadvertently erased. McCall's mother, Janice, would go on to join the search, and, like Kirby, found the house eerily intact, yet devoid of its occupants. Purses lay abandoned, clothing neatly folded, and cigarettes left untouched. With knowledge of the scene spreading, it would only take hours for this perplexing puzzle to attract a swarm of worried friends and family, who would go on to unwittingly contaminate the potential crime scene. The absence of any sign of struggle, save for the broken porch light, caused many to wonder if a crime had taken place at all. Levitt's bed was noted to have been slept in, which caused even more confusion, as the fact that all her personal belongings, including all the money in the house, the cars, the keys, and even the dog, had been left behind. The case of the Springfield Three and their Vanishing Act would remain shrouded in obscurity, leaving investigators grappling with a maze of unanswered questions, such as who or what orchestrated the baffling disappearance, and who would be able to do so without leaving any overt clues. Unfortunately, one of, if not the single best piece of evidence in the case, which occurred within the walls of 1717 East Delmar Street, was destroyed, leaving investigators with their wheels spinning in pursuit of the truth which could illuminate this cryptic case. As the clock struck midnight on December 31st, 1992, hope flickered in the form of a mysterious caller to America's Most Wanted hotline. The voice on the other end of the phone possessed what would be referred to as a treasure trove of knowledge about the Springfield Three's bewildering disappearance. However, before a vital link could be established with Springfield investigators, the call would abruptly be disconnected, leaving the caller's identity concealed. Police would go on to plead for this mysterious informant to reach out to them, yearning to unravel the truth that lingered tantalizingly just out of reach. However, the caller would remain silent, and they would never resurface again. In 1997, a milestone would be reached. The Springfield Three would be declared as legally deceased, even though their case file remains classified as a missing persons case. Years later, hope and intrigue would once more spring forth, as an intriguing tip surfaced, suggesting that the resting place for the missing women lay within the foundations of the south parking garage at Cox Hospital. In 2007, crime reporter Kathy Braid, joined by a mechanical engineer named Rick Norland, would embark on a quest of discovery based on this tip. They would be armed with ground-penetrating radar, and eventually Norland would detect three strange anomalies, alluding to the possibility of this being the gravesite location. There were particularly two parallel anomalies entwined with a third. However, skepticism surrounded the tip's credibility, and eventually the Springfield Police Department, skeptical of this lead, would go on to ponder the cost of unearthing the truth beneath the concrete and steel of the parking garage, which had been constructed over a year after the disappearance of the Springfield Three. The elusive nature of this tip left authorities rather cautious. However, the whispers of an underground grave tantalized the city. In the labyrinth of the mystery of the Springfield Three, suspects emerged, like specters looming over this mystery. Amongst them was Dustin Recla, a former flame of Suzie Streeter, whose criminality loomed with an eerie significance. This was because a few months prior to the disappearances, Recla decided to break into a mausoleum and pilfer $30 worth of gold fillings from a skull. His potential motive was due to Streeter being the one who provided investigators with a statement about his mausoleum break-in, positioning herself as a potential witness against Recla in court. Suspicion mounted as Recla and two companions who had accompanied him in his desecration of the tomb were known to be together in the vicinity on the fateful night of the woman's disappearance. Yet the cast of potential suspects did not end there. A chilling figure named Robert Craig Cox would emerge from the shadows of a Texas prison. He had already been imprisoned for kidnapping and robbery. Cox tantalized the public with supposed cryptic knowledge of the three women's fate. With a murder case in Florida haunting his past, Cox boldly proclaimed that the women had been murdered and their bodies concealed, the final resting place of the three being a mystery that he would keep to himself. An encounter with investigators in 1992 would yield an alibi for him. This was provided by his then girlfriend and corroborated by his parents. However, the validity of this would come into question, as his girlfriend would later recant, revealing that Cox had coerced her into fabricating a lie so he may have an alibi. Said alibi would coincide with the disappearance of the Springfield Three. This potentially forced alibi would confuse investigators, who would wonder why would he want recognition for a crime that he could potentially not have committed. As years have gone by, time has been both a friend and a foe. The case would swell with a deluge of tips, numbering far more than 5,000 individual tips. Yet, every year, truth seemed to linger further and further out of reach. With the information provided, a timeline can be formed to better understand the chain of events surrounding the case. June 6th, 1992. High school graduates Suzie Streeter and Stacy McCall celebrate their accomplishment at various graduation parties throughout the evening in Springfield, Missouri. At around 2 a.m., June 7th, 1992, the last known sighting of Suzie and Stacy occurs as they depart from the final graduation party with plans to spend the night at their friend's house. Their friend, Jaylene Kirby, unfortunately has her house too full for them, so the pair changes their minds and decide to stay at Suzie's house at 1717 East Delmer Street, where Suzie and her mother, Sherrill Levitt, live. Later that same night, they would also be spotted in Battlefield. At 11:55 p.m. on June 6th, 1992, Sherrill Levitt speaks with a friend on the phone about painting an armoire, which becomes the last contact anyone has with her. June 7th, 1992, at around 9 a.m., Kirby and her boyfriend visit Suzie's home after Suzie and Stacy fail to show up at her house as planned for their trip to a water park. They note the front door is found unlocked, and they also see that there is no sign of Suzie, Stacy, or Sherrill. However, all three women's cars are found parked outside. Following this, they go inside the house, where they find Suzie and Stacy's purses in the living room floor, along with Stacy's neatly folded clothing from the night before. Suzie and Sherrill's cigarettes are also discovered inside the house. Janice McCall, Stacy's mother, soon visits the house that same day after unsuccessful attempts to reach her daughter by phone. She too finds the purses and clothing of the three women, but she would also go on to stumble upon a strange message on the answering machine, which would later be inadvertently erased. December 31st, 1992. A man calls America's Most Wanted hotline with what appears to be crucial information about the disappearances. However, the call is disconnected and the caller would never make contact with the Springfield investigators. 1997. Sherrill Levitt and Suzie Streeter are declared legally dead. However, their case files remain officially filed under missing persons. In 2007, a crime reporter officer invites a mechanical engineer to scan an area which investigators had received a tip about potentially containing the woman's bodies. Said area was the parking garage of Cox Hospital, where the scan reveals 3 anomalies which could indicate a potential grave site. Later, Robert Craig Cox, who is imprisoned in Texas for kidnapping and robbery, claims he knows about the murders and that the bodies will never be found. He had lived in Springfield at the time of the disappearances and provided contradictory statements regarding his whereabouts. As we have delved into the saga of the Springfield Three, an enigma which has captured the hearts and minds of many for over 3 decades, we find a case where the lives of 3 women took a dark turn as they seemingly vanished without a trace, despite a multitude of tips from the public, over 5,000 to be exact. The fate of the Springfield Three remains cloaked in uncertainty. Their loved ones are left to wonder while they grapple with the unyielding absence of answers. In the search for answers, even the foundation of a hospital's parking garage came under scrutiny, and even when anomalies were detected, the case would not move forward, leaving the truth elusive. Honestly, with what little information exists on the case, it feels like they might have just as well been deleted from reality. The case of the Springfield Three appears to be one in which the truth may never be uncovered. If you remained with me until the end, I thank you, and I do hope you stay tuned and subscribe for more content.